Okay. I can hear myself now. Can you hear me now? Oh, I seem to have frozen though. It's so annoying when you add like another thing, it just screws up the video capture. I'm going to add another video capture thing. Bear with me. Okay. Now it can't see me. It's always something, you know? All right. And I should be back. Are we back? Technology is trying to derail this, but it's not going to happen. We're not going to let it happen. You can see me, yes. You can hear me, yes. I'll start again. We weren't that far into it. I wanted to say that Mark Young, who is chatting below and letting me know where my technical difficulties lie, is the model citizen when it comes to doing this courk, this course, tackling these exercises. He has gone minimally, he's done all the exercises so far, but he's also gone a little bit over and above, and he's been very exuberant, I would say, in doing things quickly, really applying himself. And the methodologies that I have shared, good, we're back. The methodologies I have shared in regards to how to accomplish things is something I've tried to build into the courk, such as the calendar, right? The way I use a calendar to mark off every day that I've done work on things. That's something I learned from Jerry Seinfeld. That's incorporated in the cork, right? The ideology of Stephen Pressfield, how a professional attacks something versus how an amateur attacks something. All the tricksters are amateurs. That's why their shows are terrible, and that's why they can't create any magic. So we've attacked it from the professional mindset, which is we're going to work diligently, day in and day out, to try to learn this, try to learn to see, so we can study who's really good at this, and then we can use those approaches for our own shows. That's the whole reasoning. And as Mark can attest, one of the, and a few others who are past the first introductory chapter 1, or maybe not finished chapter 2 yet, but they're working on it. I've checked in with everybody, and then most of the people are already, good way into chapter 2's exercises. I think except for one person maybe, but the rest of the people are like finding the time. And these are people who, like myself, are on vacation. I know another one of our members just had a new kid, started a new job. Other people have started new jobs that are working on this. Other people are on vacation, and yet they are still doing the work, which has pleasantly surprised me. And they have an aptitude. They've shown an aptitude. These first 3 chapters I have sort of designed as establishing a baseline. And so I can see how you're taking in these ideas, how you're watching these media pieces I'm sharing, how you're reading and copying out these short stories, or whatever the task is that I've given to you. I want to see how you approach it. I want to see, the work you do, what you generate from doing the exercises, and also whether you get it right or wrong, so to speak. That's the least important part so far, because hopefully that's going to be worked on throughout. If you're already in chapter 2's exercises, I don't remember exactly the order of all the exercises because there's quite a few. But at some point early on in this course, you are assigned a trick, hopefully you've never done before. And I've purposely made it a self-working trick because one of my pet peeves, anyone who's listened to my podcast, the full run of my podcast knows, one of my pet peeves is people who say they're, people who just self-describe themselves as sleight of hand artists. That is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. And when you do that, it's almost an instant tell that a person is not serious, is not a magician in any sense of the word, and is looking for some sort of credit for all the toil they believe they've put into learning methodologies. But you never hear anyone say they're a self-working artist, right? Because they want credit for something, the difficult, esoteric sleight of hand. And I have many friends who are caught up in that so badly that they can't see the forest for the trees because they're just like so trick-centric, so methodologically focused. It's like methods. They can only see methods, right? We're blowing those blinders away because none of that stuff really matters when you're trying to create magic. Those are mere adjuncts to the meaning of what you're showing people, which is where armature is king, and really king of everything. This goes beyond the scope of the cork, but the further you get into armature, the more you'll realize it's the whole way we communicate. It's all writing. And if you're not incorporating the concept of armature into your writing, your speaking, maybe you do public speaking outside of magic or performing, no armature, you're sunk. The effect that you're trying to generate in a person is not gonna. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna land the way you want it to land. And in this morning's email, I sent an email to the list. I talked about how I ran into some people where a magician, a trickster, young guy, I think he was like in early 20s maybe, came out of a store. Some people saw me performing. They alerted some kid who had a deck of cards. He came over. And all he was interested in is like the tricks and the methodologies. And there's some of the tricks in my show he'd never seen before. One, because it came out of a book nobody reads. Two, I created the second one. So, I think he'd seen the last one maybe, but he was really enamored with the first trick, which was a rope trick. A lot of magicians are enamored with that trick when they see it because they've never seen anyone do it before. And then I had a whole presentation as part of the armature and blah, 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 right? But his dad, when confronted with the show, was paying keen attention, and he got the right feeling from it. You could see that he was moved, so much so that aside from his young son's kind of like jibber jabber about the tricks or whatever, and I tried to set that guy straight a little bit by saying like, well, you shouldn't be, doing everyone else's tricks. You should go into the literature yourself and find your own tricks. That's another podcast I put out years ago where I talked about you should never be doing tricks you see in someone else's show. So one of the things I hope to accomplish with the people going through the cork is I'm assigning them these self-working tricks that they've probably never seen before, never done before. Maybe they've read those books that they're in. I'm pulling them out of a random pastiche of books. But hopefully you've never done those tricks before so that you have to learn them from anew. And then we're slowly going to build them up. We're going to get the armature. Now, one of the things that may be confusing, just making sure we're not getting any questions here, but one of the things may be confusing is that one of the first exercises in the introductory chapter, you list out a bunch of terrible things and situations that have befallen you in your real life. So let me share, so we don't have to share anybody else's stuff, let me share my own stuff. For instance, in my life, my mother died when I was 10 and a half. Okay, drowned in a boating accident. So that would be one thing I would put in there. Before that, my dog Sandy passed away. Right? I was fired from my first job as a dishwasher at this place called a hotel restaurant called the Travel Lodge. I wasn't so broken up about that, to be honest, but it was free buffet food every Sunday, so it was a pretty good deal at the time. And so that was like an early situation where that was the first job I ever had, really. I think outside of delivering flyers door to door as like a kid on a bike kind of thing. But I got fired from that job because I really didn't like cleaning pots and pans. So I was learning stuff that I didn't like to do. And my friend had the shift ahead of me. He would leave the pots and pans like the caked on. You know, you had to use like a sword basically to get the stuff off. So things like this, you know, I've never, knock on wood, I've never been in any car wrecks, never had a house burned down, any of that stuff. But those are all things you could list if that stuff happened to you. And what we're trying to do there is we're going to turn that stuff, the things you learned by surviving those situations, we're going to turn that, the next, I believe in chapter 1, you're asked to come up with an armature statement. So basically like a proverb or a moral for what you learned about surviving those ordeals. And then we're pairing that statement, right, with the trick, the self-working trick that I assign you, and that is sort of the baseline for where we're going to start to create an effect that will become armature. And so these are sort of the steps. So once you get past the few of the exercises up front, everything is sort of setting the rest of the cork up as we go. And eventually, I hope, depending on how quickly they do the work or what they want, because there'll be some interviewing going on later, this could result in an entire show. This could result in a series of, you know, one-off effects. The choice will be yours. Maybe a combination of both. Because in my like performing repertoire, I have like my street show, I have a couple indoor shows, and I have a series of maybe 3 or 4 one-off effects that I could do for people, where just if I wanted to do just one thing, and they are all armature. So there's no reason that either one effect or a series of effects strung together, be that, you know, a mini show or some hour and 10-minute evening gala or something, you have to have something you're imparting. That's what we're doing. And so all these exercises, some of which you may not understand even at first why they're being done. The key is to just do them, to throw yourself right into the deep end and complete those exercises, because you'll see, I think, as we go, especially now that we'll get into this 3rd chapter, and that will sort of provide me, I'm already getting a good idea where people are at, what they're able to comprehend from the media that they're forced to watch, and exercises they're forced to do. And so hopefully that will lead us to what we're all after, which is like real magic tricks, real magical effects that we can perform for people that will leave them better than we found them. And that's really one of the things that is super important when you get to armature and to learning about armature and understanding armature statements. And like, the importance of all this is a respect for the audience that the average trickster does not have. The magic community is just rife with like me. I want to do these tricks at people that have no meaning whatsoever and really aren't important to anybody other than the performer, because they just like them. That's another reason why I'm assigning tricks to people instead of having you pick your own or something, is the tricks don't matter. I could take any trick almost and any armature statement and pair them together. But there are some, as you go and as you create more of these things, you may see this more readily when you're doing it yourself. The methods themselves may lend themselves better to a given armature statement than another one. Right? It really depends what the armature statement is. Some tricks might fit that one better, just in terms of the number of steps you have to go through, how long the method is, stuff like this. You'll see. Now, in addition to that, and I've noticed this already with the videos people have sent in as part of the courk, we're also going to attempt to work on some performing aspects that you just can't get out of a book. And really, you can't get from the magic community, more or less, because they're not concerned with this kind of stuff. They're concerned with throwing tricks at people, and it doesn't matter what happens. And so in this case, from my extensive performing experience, I've learned a lot about what you would call the blocking of things and the transition of things. You know, the transition, if you're doing a whole show, the transition between tricks. All the choreography that goes into actually doing the method, which methods you choose, like our, you know, for instance, if we have something like a classical pass, that's part of a trick that you do. Is the classic pass the best option in that scenario? And for most people, they're just doing whatever the trick originally was written with. But once you're turning it into armature, and you actually have a presentation, there's, you know, I don't know, 50 different kinds of passes. One of those passes might fit better to the choreography of the story you're telling and how you intend to tell it, how you intend to have people take cards or handle props, or how you're going to talk about things. The method should be interwoven with that seamlessly. And most people who are just solely interested in tricks, which is like 99% of people, they don't think about that. They're just doing their second deals and their whatever because that's what the trick requires. But that is a dumb way to go about things. There is also something that I see people screw up all the time, especially on YouTube and on social media. Is there much like, so see, one aspect of armature that is so important is that it unifies. When you create from an armature, everything is part of that armature. It's another representation of it, right? So if we're looking at Jaws, which is the framing device I've chosen for this cork, and we know that the armature statement is, you must face your fear to conquer your fear. Right from the get-go, all the way through to the end, are just more and different angles and different people experiencing fear, right? From the girl who gets taken at the beginning to even the Brodies, we learn that they're in a completely new environment because they came from the city and they're on the island, so they have some trepidation about what's going to happen in this new scenario. The kid cutting his hand on the broken swing that Brody's yet to fix, and Brody's like, stay off of there. Right? All these, and then I don't know how many examples there are. I've never counted them. But that will be one of the exercises upcoming in chapter 3, I believe. Will be you going through the whole Jaws movie again and trying to come up with all the instances that represent fear. That's because that's what a story is. It's just coming at the same idea from a bunch of different angles so that it's repeated over, over, over. And there's always a contrast, right? So literally the word contrast means like opposites, light and dark, right? It really means the opposite. But contrast is, in a lot of cases in the modern world, contrast sort of means like degrees of variation, which it doesn't. That's not what the word means. So I prefer the term exaggeration when trying to tell people about it, because everyone knows what exaggeration is. I didn't catch this fish. You know, the real fish was like this, but I said it's like this, right? In a story, it's always exaggerated so that you get the idea. So it like osmosis through you, right? So like Luke Skywalker doesn't start out as a Jedi, you know, universe-saving pilot Jedi trainee. He's the complete opposite of that. He's a juvenile teenage farm boy working on moisture evaporators. And as we go along, we start to see as he develops, he's got mechanical aptitude, he's a good pilot, all these kind of things start to build, right? Because they're all suggesting what's going to, the same idea over and over and over. And of course, in Luke's case, it's about learning about the Force, and that's the faith in the Star Wars universe and all this kind of stuff. We may use A New Hope eventually as one of the things, so I don't want to go too far into it. But so it's exaggerated. Another good example, Chief Brody is a cop, but he's a city cop. He's just brand new at serving and protecting in Amity, right? And Amity, when he says, there's some line early in the movie at some point where he talks about how much, I think he tells Hooper when they're going out on the boat, the two of them after cutting the shark open, he tells Hooper there's only been like one shooting in the history of Amity, or some very low level of crime, right? So he's taken this job, and it's kind of like, compared to the city, it's like a cushy bit, is what he's sort of insinuating. But then people start getting chewed up. So it throws him into a loop where he's like, oh my God, I didn't expect this to be happening. And then like the mayor is trying to keep the beaches open, and there's all these people coming at him. So that's a good example of exaggeration. He's not just some cop in a small town that's been there for 30 years. He's brand new. And he's not from the island. He's from the city. He's the opposite. And we see that when he first meets the guy that got drunk and failed to go into water with Chrissy at the beginning. Because he says, no, I'm an islander. And even Brody's wife, when they're on the beach, is talking to some other lady, said, can I become an islander? And she says, no, unless you're born here, you can't be an islander. So they're like outsiders. They're not the same as these people. That's the contrast they're drawing, is these people are like foreigners, basically, from somewhere else, from the city. And you can't be an islander if you weren't born there, right? So that's an exaggeration. It's not just like someone from down the way. They're from a completely different environment. So when you're trying to decipher a story, you're looking for the exaggerations, right? Jaws isn't just a 13-foot white-tip shark. He's a 25-foot great white shark. Right? It's not just your average shark that we've all encountered. It's bigger than any shark that's ever been found. Right? That's another example of the exaggeration, because you're trying to hammer home how scary this is, how much you're trying to generate that fear in the audience, like the characters are all experiencing. So that's important, right? It seems one thing to keep in mind is when you start learning how to decipher, and you guys are doing a good job so far, from the wizard's point of view, from the behind the curtains, right, the backstage area, it will seem very blatant how blatant everything is once you're able to decipher a movie. Like when you have watched the chapter 2 exercises has you watch Jaws 5 days in a row, start to finish. And there's other exercises like that coming up, and that's primarily meant to force you to watch it over and over again in order, the more you watch it, some of these things will start to jump out at you, because you're almost bored with the story, how things go, the words, some of the lines. That stuff has to become like subconscious to you. And then some of the other elements will start to show themselves, because now every time you watch it, you'll see new things probably. And when you're looking for the contrast of things, you'll see you got Brody, who's kind of like the do-gooder guy. You got Hooper, who's like the brainiac, right? You got the cop, you got the brainiac, and you got the like miserly, scary in his own right. They're all contrasted, right? They're all completely different. That's important, because you're trying to hammer home, like when each of them gets afraid, it's like a different, Brody's already afraid, but when Hooper gets afraid and then Quint gets afraid, it continues to hammer that idea home, right? That you got to you got to face your fear to conquer it. Now, one of the other exercises I have people do, I think you in chapter 2, but it's repeated again in chapter 3 with more, much like the Jaws thing, watching it over and over, is The Last Jedi, Star Wars number 8, directed by Rian Johnson. Directed and written by Rian Johnson, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think there was a co-writer. But same idea. Completely different armature statement. But again, repeated. And almost like in every instance. And sometimes that's confusing for people because it's not like every line somebody says is going to say the full armature statement. It's like maybe this part of the scene will represent that. And then we'll get a little teaser for the next, it's not as, it's not literally like literally everything, but it's literally every section. You could divide it up neatly into sections that would each contain the armature statement. That's why later in the Cork, we'll be watching some movies where I'll give you only the first 20 minutes or something, or the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and try to make you decide what the armature statement is and why. Because it's represented in everything as part of there's no filler in a story that is armature. These days, we're so used to getting filler TV shows, filler episodes, just bullshit, basically, that people are going out. Entertainment, which is another thing we'll be covering going forward. How weak entertainment is, really, in the grand scheme of things. It can be important. It is a tool to use, but it is a very low-level tool. It just helps you attract. It's like, the Venus flytrap attracting its prey, right? It's the same sort of idea to make something entertaining. Now, a lot of people, they strive only for being entertaining. You hear a lot of performers say, I just want to, I don't want to just do that. I want to be entertaining. It's like, yeah, but if just doing the trick is like a -5, being entertaining is 0. Like you're not even above water level yet. But if that's all people expect from you, they'll kind of be satisfied in a way. They'll be, oh, we saw this magician, and the public at large thinks magicians are crap. Very low-level entertainment. Because entertainment is low-level. An organ grinder and a monkey can be entertaining. Jugglers are entertaining, right? So we'll delve into that in another section of the Cork, in an appendix specifically that deals with entertainment. Because that's not really a goal. That's a tool you can use, but it's not something, like Schindler's List is not entertaining, for example. But it's more powerful than probably like 8/10 of any movie you've ever seen. So that's what I mean. It's not so. A lot of people in the magic community harp on being entertaining and but it's just one tool. It's kind of like mystery. Mystery is a tool. It's not the be-all, end-all. There's another appendix in the Cork where I go through what the definition of magic is, and like basically everybody in the history of magic has gotten it wrong. Teller, Max Maven, Arthur C. Clarke, the author, who said any sufficiently advanced technology is, magic. It's not. A number of Max Maven, number of definitions people have given for magic where they're completely wrong. I think Christian Chelman may be one of them too, who I have a lot of respect for, a lot of these people, but they got this completely wrong. And that's one of the first things that's, when people go down the wrong path, is because they really have no working. It's like Brian McDonald says about story. If you don't really have a definition for it, you can't really talk about it. So until we know what magic is, real magic with a capital M, it's very hard to try to create it. What ends up happening is people just create a bunch of tricks and nonsense and meaningless crap. Okay, well, part of that has to do with, like, you have the wrong definition or no definition. And so that's something we're going to tackle. I'm going to tackle in a later thing. The Arthur C. Clarke is just a trickster's appreciation of magic, and he's dead wrong, as are everybody else I listed. So these type things as we go forward. Now, also going forward, you've noticed undoubtedly, if you've done the exercises, that I have you going out and finding open mics. One of the things I can't impress upon people enough is that being a good magician requires performing. There's no way around it. You cannot sit in your house and become a good magician with a capital M. It is an impossibility. Also, performing for people online is fraught with all kinds of nonsensical, bad ideas. This is meant to be done live, in person, with strangers. That's the real where the rubber meets the road. Because everybody's family can, oh, you did such a good job, Johnny, and whatever, and like your neighbor and people you know and people who love you, people who want you to succeed. But the truth is the stranger wants you to succeed too. Because they want things to go well for themselves and for you. They don't want to see someone embarrass themselves. But that's what you see usually with a magician. It's just embarrassing. And they're kind of like, okay, oh, he did something with a rope and a deck of cards, and he cracked a few jokes from the 40s, and then, sure, I enjoyed it. Yeah. Then we went out for dinner. That's not what you want. You want people to be talking about you for the rest of their lives because they were moved. So when I said in a couple emails recently, I said, like, you don't know what good reactions are because you're only getting trickster reactions. Surprise, people's minds being blown. That's not a good reaction. People's hearts being blown. That's a good reaction. People being moved to tears. People being moved to reconsider what they're doing with their lives. Right? People weeping tears of joy. Those are the kind of things. When you see people, for example, in Derek Delgadio's show at the end, when it's being revealed, he's revealing what these people are, and they're reading the letters that their friends or family read to them. You see them, how much they're being moved, right? I think the end gets a little tricky in terms of like it leans a little bit into tricksterism, where I'm not as big of a fan as when he's sitting people down and telling them which card they picked, which identity they picked at the beginning. I think the bit of that is a little trickstery. But you see the letters in the story about his mother and the various other aspects of the show are moving people. And I feel like he's doing a good job. He's not trying to be funny necessarily, because he doesn't. I've never met Derek, but he doesn't seem to be like that humorous of a performer. And it seems like he came from a very sort of like tricksterish background where he was involved, card cheating and all this kind of stuff he was really interested in, which is kind of trickster shit. So I feel like that there's a good example there, right? As to you see people getting moved. When I first started turning my show into armature and sort of really working on every single little thing, all of a sudden people started crying. People started being moved in that way. And you're like, people came up to you, and it wasn't this like, oh my God, my mind's blown, and they're walking around in a circle and like, I can't believe it. How did you do it? None of that happened anymore. It completely changed. And people weren't thinking that anymore. They weren't thinking, how was it done? How? No, they felt why it was done. That I showed them this as some like massive extension of kindness between us. Right? That I was going to share something I had learned, because in the future they might need this. or it reinforces something they already know, but is helped through the reinforcement of it, right? They're reminded, oh, I shouldn't be doing that dumb crap with my life. I shouldn't let people, put me down. There are more important things than, like, money. I do deserve love. All these kind of things that are like the most human aspects in our lives that have very little to do with like the triviality and the surface level garbage. And so that's what's important. And that's why a real magician is a master of that. That's why the people in the magic community are not masters. None of them. None of them. Some of them are very good at entertaining. Some of them are very funny. Some of them very good at the methods. But none of that leads to the place where real magic exists. And so that's what we're after when we're going into this cork. We are trying to generate real magic. There are still people that I hear from every once in a while that I haven't seen in 8 years, 9 years, who check in with me every once in a while because they're like, that the show I did for them created this inexorable bond that can't be broken because I was giving instead of trying to take. Most tricksters are trying to take. They want a reaction because they want to be validated that the toil they've put into these esoteric methods is like worth it. And they want to be seen as somebody clever and debonair. Something I call Palpatine syndrome. They want to be known as a great sorcerer. Lightning springs from their fingers. And all of that is just pure and unadulterated bullshit. And what you want is magic, which is another form of storytelling, another way to tell stories, when done with a capital M, and when employing armature as your vehicle. It's a service industry. You are giving, right? There's a great book called a Seth Godin book, who's a marketer, The Practice. It's called The Practice, and we're probably going to encounter it in the cork too, but I think it's in there somewhere. But shipping creative work, it's called The Practice. In The Practice, it talks about how in Turkey, I believe, Turkey is what they think they call it now. There's a different pronunciation these days than just straight Turkey. People go into a bread store to buy their bread. They have the option of buying if they're buying one loaf, let's say, they have the option of buying a second loaf and hanging it on a hook. And these bread stores have hooks where people can hang other loaves for people who can't afford bread. That is the job of the magician. The magician is giving somebody something they can't get elsewhere. Especially nowadays, with TV and movies being like the absolute dregs most of the time. And does anyone go to theater anymore? Like, stuff like this. In fact, I'm going to some theater this afternoon. So there you go. Some people do go to theater. But you're not getting the same content you used to get. And that was the whole point of watching it with other people. That's why being live or watching it with a group is so important. Nowadays, everything's streaming. You're watching it by yourself or maybe with one other person or whatever. It's not the same. It's supposed to be a communal, shared experience. And magic is one of the real magic with a capital M that a magician with a capital M delivers is that communal experience where you are participating with the audience. And so that is what we're after. We're after the giving and not the taking. Is it a form of self-expression? Yes, of course it is. You choose to do magic. Some people choose to make movies. Some people choose to write fiction or nonfiction. Other people write poetry or whatever. There's always choices that can be made. Other people just choose to raise kids and deliver morals and lessons and show them how the world works. That's another version, right? So that's important. You don't want to take this trivially. That's why it's important to do the exercises to the best of your ability. And if you can, go above and beyond, such as people like Mark Young. There's other people I could, who aren't here today, so I won't necessarily speak to them. But other people who are doing just as well, making amazing choices, working their ass off despite they could make any excuse they wanted to. They're on vacation. They have kids. They have a new job where they're, going to go in early and stay late or whatever. And they're still doing the courk. They're still getting the exercises done. This is why I'm very fond of the term, the Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL guy. If you've never seen Jocko, he's a big square-headed, square-necked former Navy SEAL. One of his idioms he likes to throw out is that all your excuses are lies. And we know that it's not like literally true, because there are valid reasons why things don't occur. You got a car crash on the way to work, you're probably not going to be to work on time. But it's the idea, the concept of not making excuses that's important when he delivers that proverb, essentially. Things are going to happen. But when you set out to not make excuses and just do the work, you'll be surprised how quickly you can accomplish things. And some of the people in this courk have surprised me greatly by the expediency and the consistency with which they've applied themselves. And they have my utmost respect, because everyone's got their life going on, as do I. I'm doing this live stream on vacation myself. And Mark Young, just now in the comments, which people can read, he says, if he can do it, anybody can. I won't share any Mark's details necessarily, but some of the things Mark chose to share in the course, like a lot of the other people, in terms of some of these terrible situations that have befallen them, Mark's had some very nasty ones, I would say, befall him. And he has survived and learned and perseveres and is just applying himself unbelievably, just hammering away at these things. And that is the kind of attitude. If you want something in life, you have to go and get it. The world meets nobody halfway. We'll probably learn about that later in the courk too. I think that's all I have for today. Doesn't seem to be any super pressing questions. The people who seem to have made their way through the exercises for the most part understood exactly what I wanted and are doing. And I've told people on a few occasions if they were off the mark and sort of how they interpreted what I wanted. But it's been very few, which is great. And I think this is what it's about. I see these magicians. I mean, you're becoming real magicians, because this is the kind of professional attitude it takes. And you're welcome. I'm glad this talk is helpful for everybody watching, and in the future, you can do this. I believe in you. I know it can be. If one man can do it, another can do it. And that's all I have for today. Chapter 3 will come out tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I'll add everybody, regardless if you complete the exercise, of course, everybody gets Chapter 3 to read through and do the exercises. 1 p.m. tomorrow. I look forward to seeing what you guys do with this next set of exercises. And I will start providing some feedback in a more concrete form now that I've seen this. And I'll probably wait, in some cases, towards the end of the Chapter 3 exercises to see sort of how you handle these things. And then I can, because there's very specific things I've seen happening in a few occasions where I'm like, okay, they got that one wrong, but here's why. And I'm trying to put together a comprehensive feedback thing for everybody. 3 weeks from now will be our next office hours. Thank you for attending. Any questions, you can always send them to me, d'artagnanmagic@gmail.com. Whether you're inside, outside, whether it's about the cork or anything else in your life, feel free to drop me a line. I'll do the best I can to answer it if I have that kind of acumen, or direct you to some place where you might find that answer. Until later, friends.